Welcome to Boost Coding Flow channel. In this demonstration, we will show you how we as master admin can take an user to be an admin or a master admin. We also can demote any admins or master admins as they are not managing the community any longer. As addition, we also can delete any unactive users or the users that are not in the community anymore. By doing this, we can make sure the users in the community are the valid people who needs access to the community information while being controlled and managed by the valid admin that designated by the master admin. To begin, let's make the headers for the sheet. For this demonstration, the headers consist of first name, last name, phone number, home address, email domain, and the password to sign in the community website. After that, we name the sheet as UserData, then copy the sheet twice and name them as AdminData and MasterData sheet. For the AdminData sheet and MasterData sheet, we give additional headers. The additional headers are original email and original domain. After the sheet has been set up, let's do the script to apply the functions by clicking extensions on the menu bar that choose the apps script. The constant sheet _ID stores the unique identifier for the Google Sheets document, which is a string of characters. The constants user _sheet _name, admin _sheet _name, and master _sheet _name are defined as string values representing the names of the specific sheets within the spreadsheet. These sheet names are UserData, AdminData, and MasterData, respectively. The doGet function serves as the entry point for the web application when it is accessed via a URL. This function calls HTML service.create HTML output from file and uses the string index as an argument to specify the HTML file to be served to the user. The function returns the HTML output, which is the content of index.html file, thereby displaying the web interface to the end user. The search row function is designed to find a user record based on an email and password. The function takes two parameters, email and password, both expected to be strings. The function first calls getSheet by email domain, passing the email argument to determine which sheet to search within. It then uses the getDataRange method on the user sheet object to obtain all cells with data and the getValues method to retrieve the data as a two-dimensional array stored in the variable data. The email string is split using the split method with the character as a delimiter, and the result is stored in the array email parts. An if statement checks if the email parts array does not have exactly two elements, and if true, the function returns null. The username variable is assigned the first element of the email parts array, which is the part before the symbol. The domain variable is constructed by concatenating the symbol with the second element of the email parts array. A for loop initializes a variable I to the number 1, which is the second row of data, and continues as long as I is less than the length property of the data array, incrementing I by 1 each iteration. An if statement checks if the name of the current sheet, retrieved using getName, is strictly equal to the string UserData inside this conditional block. Another if statement checks if the element in the current row at column index 4, which is data I4, is equal to the username, and the element at column index 5, data I5, is equal to the domain, and the element at column index 6, data I6, is equal to the password. If all conditions are true, the function returns an object literal. This object contains properties first name, last name, phone, address, email, and role. The values for these properties are taken from the corresponding indices of the data array, where data I0 is the first name, data I1 is the last name. Data I2 is the phone, data I3 is the address. The email property is created by concatenating data I4 and data I5. The role property is determined by calling the getUserRole function with data I5 as the argument. If the sheet name is not UserData, an else block executes a similar if statement that checks the same column indices for username, domain, and password, returning an identical object structure if a match is found. If the loop completes without finding a match, the function returns null. The getUserRole function accepts a single parameter named domain, which is a string. The function contains an if statement that checks if the domain parameter is strictly equal to the string at master.com. If this condition is true, the function returns the string master admin. If the first condition is false, an else if statement checks if the domain is strictly equal to at admin.com, returning the string admin if true. If neither condition is met, the function executes a return statement that yields the string user. The addRow function is responsible for inserting a new user record. It receives 6 parameters: first name, last name, phone, address, email, and password, all expected to be string values. The function begins by calling getSheet-by-email-domain with the email parameter to obtain the appropriate sheet object, stored in UserSheet. The email string is split at the at character, and the resulting parts are stored in the email parts array. An if statement verifies that email parts has exactly 2 elements. If not, it throws a new error object with the message invalid email format. The username variable is set to the first element of email parts, and the domain variable is set to a string starting with at followed by the second element of email parts. The function retrieves all data from UserSheet using getDataRange and getValues, storing it in the data variable. A for loop starts at index 1, skips the header row, and iterates through the data array. Inside the loop, an if statement checks if any existing row has the same username at index 4 and domain at index 5. If a duplicate is found, the function throws a new error with the message email already exists. If no duplicate is found after the loop, the function calls the appendRow method on UserSheet. This method takes a single array argument containing the values first name, last name, phone, address, username, domain, and password, in that exact order, to add a new row to the sheet. The updateRow function modifies an existing user's data. It takes 2 parameters, email as a string and updated data as an array. The function first determines the correct sheet by calling getSheet-by-email-domain with the email. It then fetches all sheet data into the data array. The email is split into parts. If it does not contain exactly one at symbol, the function returns the boolean false. The username is the part before at, and domain is at plus the part after. A for loop iterates through each row of data starting from index 1. For each row, an if statement checks if the username at column index 4 and domain at column index 5 match the provided email components. When a match is found, the function uses UserSheet.getRange to target the specific row. The arguments for getRange are I+1, which the row number in the sheet, which is 1 more than the array index. The number 1, which the starting column, the number 1, which is the number of rows to target, and updated data.length, which is the number of columns to target. Based on the length of the updated data array, the setValues method is then called with an array containing updated data as its single element to write the new data. The function then returns the boolean true. If the loop finishes without finding a match, the function returns false. The getSheetByEmail domain function determines which Google Sheet to use based on the email domain. It accepts one parameter, email, which is a string. The function uses an if statement to check if the email string ends with @master.com using the ends-with method. If true, it returns a sheet object by calling spreadsheet_app.openById with sheet_id to open the spreadsheet, and then getSheetByName with master_sheet_name to get the specific sheet. If the first condition is false, an else-if statement checks if the email ends with @admin.com, returning the sheet from admin_sheet_name if true. If neither condition is met, the function executes a return statement that gets the sheet named user_sheet_name. The getAllUserData function retrieves all data from the UserData sheet. It calls spreadsheet_app.openById with sheet_id to access the spreadsheet, then chains getSheetByName with user_sheet_name to select the specific sheet. On this sheet object, it calls getDataRange to select all cells with content and getValues to return the data as a two-dimensional array. The function returns this array. The getAllAdminData function retrieves all data from the AdminData sheet. It opens the spreadsheet using spreadsheet_app.openById with the sheet_id constant. Then gets the specific sheet by name using getSheetByName with admin_sheet_name as the argument. On this sheet object, it calls getDataRange to select the range of cells that contain data and then getValues to obtain the values as a two-dimensional array. The function returns this array of values. The getAllMasterData function retrieves all data from the MasterData sheet. It uses spreadsheet_app.openById with sheet_id to open the spreadsheet. Then getSheetByName with master_sheet_name to select the correct sheet. It then calls getDataRange on that sheet object to get the range containing data and getValues to convert that range into a two-dimensional array. This array is returned by the function. The moveUser function transfers a user record from one sheet to another. It takes three string parameters, email, from sheet, and to sheet. The function starts by opening the spreadsheet with spreadsheet_app.openById using sheet_id, storing the object in SS. It then attempts to get the source sheet using ss.getSheetByName with from sheet and the target sheet using ss.getSheetByName with to sheet, storing them in source sheet and target sheet respectively. An if statement checks if either source sheet or target sheet is falsy. If true, the function returns an object with a status property of error and a message property of sheet not found. The function retrieves all data from source sheet using getDataRange and getValues, storing it in the data variable. A for loop iterates through the data array starting from index 1. For each row, an if statement checks if the concatenation of the element at index 4 and the element at index 5 is strictly equal to the email parameter. If a match is found, a variable new row data is declared. An if statement then checks if the toSheet parameter is equal to user_sheet_name. If true, the constant original email is set to data I7 if it exists, or to data I4 plus @user.com if data I7 is falsy. The constant original domain is set to data I8 if it exists, or to @user.com if falsy. The new row data array is then constructed with 7 elements, data I0 for first name, data I1 for last name, data I2 for phone, data I3 for address. The part of original email before it obtained via split original domain, and data, I6 for password. If the to-sheet is not user_sheet_name, the else block executes. Here, the constant original email is set conditionally. If from sheet equals user_sheet_name, it uses data, I4 plus data, I5, otherwise, it uses data, I7 plus data, I8. This original email is then split by it into original email parts. The new row data array is constructed with 9 elements: data, I0, data, I1, data, I2, data, I3, for the user's details. Then data, I0, again, potentially a placeholder, then a conditional domain string based on to sheet being admin_sheet_name or not, then data, I6 for password. Followed by original email parts 0, and at plus original email parts 1, to preserve the original email. After constructing new row data, the function calls targetSheet.append row with new row data to add the row to the target sheet. It then calls sourceSheet.delete row with I+1 as the argument to remove the row from the source sheet. The function returns an object with status set to success, message set to user moved successfully, and updated sheet set to the value of to sheet. If the loop completes without finding the email, the function returns an object with status error and message user not found. The delete user function removes a user record. It takes one parameter, email, a string. The function calls getSheet by email domain with the email to get the relevant sheet object, user sheet. It then gets all data from that sheet into the data array. The email is split into parts. If it doesn't split into 2 parts, the function returns false. The username is the part before @ and domain is @ plus the part after. A for loop iterates through the data array starting from index 1. For each row, an if statement checks if the username at index 4 and domain at index 5 match the provided email components. If a match is found, the function calls userSheet, delete row with I+1 as the argument to delete that specific row from the sheet, and then returns true. If the loop finishes without a match, the function returns false. The function logout resets the UI to the sign-in state. It removes the hidden class from the sign-in section element to show the sign-in form. It adds the hidden class to the welcome section, settings section, user editor section, admin editor section, and master editor section elements to hide those sections. It adds the hidden class to the logout button to hide it. It adds the hidden class to the sidebar element to hide the navigation. The function sign-in handles the sign-in process. It retrieves the values from the input elements with IDs, sign-in email, and sign-in password, storing them in constants email and password. It then calls google.script.run with success handler, which is a Google Apps script method to call server-side functions asynchronously. The withSuccessHandler method takes a callback function that receives data from the server. Inside this callback, an if statement checks if the data is truthy. If true, it adds the class hidden to the sign-in section element to hide it, removes the hidden class from the welcome section element to show it, removes hidden from the logout button to show it, and sets the inner text of the welcome message element to a template literal string that includes the user's first name from the data object. It then calls display sidebar with data.role as an argument, and calls populate settings with the data object. It also sets the global variables current user email to data.email and current user role to data.role. Further conditional logic checks the user's role. If data.role is either admin or masteradmin, it removes the hidden class from an element with ID's user editor button. If the role is masteradmin, it also removes hidden from elements with ID's admin editor button and master editor button. If the data is falsy, meaning login failed, an alert dialog displays the text invalid email or password. The server-side function search row is called with the email and password as arguments. The function signup handles user registration. It retrieves values from the signup form inputs: signup first name, signup last name, signup phone, signup address, signup email, and signup password, storing them in respective constants. It then calls google.script.run with success handler, which registers a success callback that shows an alert with signup successful, and calls show sign in. It also chains with failure handler to catch errors, showing an alert with the error message. The server-side function addRow is called with the 6 retrieved values as arguments. The function display sidebar generates the navigation sidebar HTML based on the user's role. It takes one parameter, role. It declares a variable sidebar TML as an empty string. An if statement checks if role is strictly equal to user. If true, sidebar TML is assigned a template literal string containing multiple anchor elements with href equals hash and text for news, chatroom, events, pollings, and an element with onclick calling open settings and text settings, each separated by line break elements. An else if statement checks if role is strictly equal to admin. If true, sidebar TML is assigned a different template literal. This string includes elements for notifications, news editor, chatrooms editor, events editor, pollings editor. An element with onclick calling open user editor and text users editor, and an element with onclick calling open settings and text settings. An else if statement checks if role is strictly equal to masteradmin. If true, sidebar TML is assigned a more extensive template literal. This string includes elements for notifications, news editor, chatrooms editor, events editor, pollings editor, an element with onclick calling open user editor and text users editor, an element with onclick calling open admin editor and text admin editor, an element with onclick calling open master editor and text master admin editor, an element for website settings, and an element with onclick calling open settings and text settings. After the conditional block, the function sets the inner HTML property of the element with ID sidebar to the value of sidebar TML. It then removes the class hidden from the sidebar element to make it visible. The function openSettings is responsible for showing the settings section. It removes the hidden class from the element with ID settings section to display it. It adds the hidden class to the elements with IDs user editor section, admin editor section, and master editor section to hide those editor interfaces. The function SaveChanges updates the user's profile. It retrieves the current values from the settings form inputs: settings first name, settings last name, settings phone, settings address, settings email, and settings password, storing them in respective constants. It then calls google.script.run with success handler, which registers a callback that shows an alert profile updated successfully, adds the hidden class to the settings section to hide it, and removes the hidden class from the welcome section to show it. The server-side function update row is called with the arguments current user email and an array containing the 6 retrieved values in the order: first name, last name, phone, address, email, and password. The function populate settings fills the settings form with the user's current data. It takes one parameter, data, an object containing user information. It sets the value property of the input element with ID, settings first name to data.firstname. It sets the value of settings last name to data.lastname. It sets the value of settings phone to data.phone. It sets the value of settings address to data.address. And it sets the value of settings email to data.email. The logout function is responsible for resetting the user interface to the initial sign-in state when a user chooses to sign out of the application. This function does not accept any parameters and does not return any value, as its sole purpose is to manipulate the visibility of various sections on the web page by modifying CSS classes. The logout function begins by using the document.getElementById method with the string sign-in section to locate the sign-in form container element in the document object model. On this element, it accesses the ClassList property, which provides methods to manipulate the element's CSS classes, and then calls the remove method with the argument hidden to make the sign-in section visible again after a user logs out. The function then calls document.getElementById again, this time with the string welcome section to target the welcome message container. Using the ClassList property on this element, it calls the add method with the argument hidden to hide the welcome section that previously displayed the user's personalized greeting. The same pattern is repeated for the settings section element, where getElementById retrieves the settings container and ClassList.add adds the hidden class to hide the profile editing form from view. The logout function proceeds to hide the user editor section by locating the element with ID user editor section and adding the hidden class through its ClassList.add method. Similarly, the admin editor section targeted by ID admin editor section receives the hidden class to ensure the admin management table is no longer visible on the screen. The master editor section identified by master editor section also has the hidden class added to its class list, completely removing all three management interfaces from the user's view. The logout function then uses document.querySelector with the selector string .logout button, which targets the button element having the class name logout button. On this button element, the ClassList.add method adds the hidden class to hide the sign out button from the interface, as the user is no longer logged in and should not see a logout option. Finally, the function retrieves the sidebar navigation menu using document.getElementById with the string sidebar and adds the hidden class to its class list, making the sidebar invisible. The result of executing this function is a clean sign-in screen with no visible user data, settings, editors, sidebar, or logout button, allowing a different user to sign in securely. The function clearSettings form resets all fields in the settings form. It sets the value property of the input with ID, settings first name to an empty string. It sets settings last name value to an empty string. It sets settings phone value to an empty string. It sets settings address value to an empty string. It sets settings email value to an empty string. And it sets settings password value to an empty string. The function showSignup switches the view from sign in to sign up. It adds the hidden class to the sign-in section element to hide it. It removes the hidden class from the sign-up section element to show the sign-up form. The function showSign-in switches the view from sign-up back to sign-in. It adds the hidden class to the sign-up section element to hide it. It removes the hidden class from the sign-in section element to show the sign-in form. The function Open User Editor displays the user editor interface. It removes the hidden class from the user editor section element to show it. It calls the load UserData function to populate the table. It adds the hidden class to the AdminEditor section, MasterEditor section, and Settings section elements to hide those sections. The function OpenAdminEditor displays the AdminEditor interface. It removes the hidden class from the AdminEditor section element to show it. It calls the loadAdminData function. It adds the hidden class to the user editor section, MasterEditor section, and Settings section elements. The function OpenMasterEditor displays the MasterAdminEditor interface. It removes the hidden class from the MasterEditor section element to show it. It calls the loadMasterData function. It adds the hidden class to the AdminEditor section, Settings section, and User Editor section elements. The function loadUserData fetches and displays all user data in the user editor table. It calls google.script.run. with success handler, which receives the server data as a parameter named data. Inside the callback, it gets a reference to the tbody element of the table with ID user editor table, using getElements by tag name, tbody 0, and stores it in the constant tbody. It sets the inner HTML property of tbody to an empty string to clear any existing rows. It then calls the forEach method on the data array, which is a two-dimensional array from the sheet. The forEach callback receives two parameters: row, the current subarray, and index, the numerical index. An if statement checks if index is strictly equal to 0. If true, the callback returns early to skip the header row. For each data row, it creates a new tr, table row, element using document.createElement, tr. It sets the inner HTML of this tr to a template literal string. This string contains td, table data, elements for row 0, first name, row 1, last name, row 2, phone, row 3, address, and a concatenation of row 4 and row 5 for the email. Another td displays the text user for the role. The final td contains 3 button elements. The first button has an onClick attribute that calls moveUser with the arguments being the concatenated email, the string UserData, and the string AdminData. Its text is makeAdmin. The second button calls moveUser with the email, UserData, and MasterData. Its text is makeMasterAdmin. The third button calls deleteUser with the email. Its text is delete. After constructing the string, the tr element is appended as a child to the tbody using appendChild. The function loadAdminData fetches and displays all admin data. It calls google.script.run. with success handler with a callback that receives the data array. It gets the tbody of the table with ID AdminEditor table. It sets the tbody's inner HTML to an empty string. It iterates over the data array using forEach, skipping the header row when index is 0. For each row, it creates a tr element and sets its inner HTML to a template literal. The template includes td elements for row 0, row 1, row 2, row 3, and the concatenated email from row 4 and row 5. A td shows admin as the role. The actions td contains 3 buttons. The first button onClick calls moveUser with the email, AdminData, and UserData. Its text is makeUser. The second button onClick calls moveUser with the email, AdminData, and MasterData. Its text is makeMasterAdmin. The third button on-click calls delete user with the email. Its text is delete. The TR is appended to the T-body. The function load master data fetches and displays all master admin data. It calls google.script.run. With success handler with a callback receiving the data array. It gets the T-body of the table with ID master editor table. It sets the T-body's inner HTML to an empty string. It uses for each on the data array, skipping the header row. For each row, it creates ATR and sets its inner HTML. The template has TD elements for row 0, row 1, row 2, row 3, and the concatenated email. A TD displays master admin. The actions TD has 3 buttons. The first button on-click calls move user with the email, master data, and UserData. Text is make user. The second button on-click calls move user with the email, master data, and admin data. Text is make admin. The third button on-click calls delete user with the email. Text is delete. The TR is appended to the T-body. The function moveUser calls the server to move a user between sheets. It takes 3 parameters, email, from sheet, and to sheet. It calls google.script.run. With success handler, which receives a response object from the server. In the callback, it shows an alert with response.message. If response.status is strictly equal to success, it conditionally calls load UserData, load AdminData, or load MasterData based on the from sheet value to refresh the source table. It also conditionally calls the same load functions based on the to sheet value to refresh the target table. The server-side function moveUser is invoked with the 3 parameters. The function delete user deletes a user after confirmation. It takes 1 parameter, email. It calls the built-in confirm function with the message, "Are you sure you want to delete this user?" If the user clicks OK, it proceeds. It then calls google.script.run. With success handler with a callback that shows an alert, user deleted successfully, and conditionally calls load admin data, load master data, or load UserData based on the email's domain to refresh the appropriate table. The server-side function delete user is called with the email argument. Finally, you need publish your Google script and HTML file, so every users can access your Google script website. Please click the Deploy blue button, then click New Deployment. Please click the cogwheel or gear icon on the right next to Select Type menu, the Select Web App menu. In the configuration settings, make sure that Who Has Access list is filled with anyone. Then click Deploy. You can review the project's privacy and terms of service to understand how the project will process and protect the data. On the bottom of the page, please choose Continue to complete the deployment process. After the deployment process completed, you will get the deployment link of your project that you will use to see the result of your project. Hope this tutorial helps you to create a simple code of Google Script yet powerful to fulfill your web system's need. Please stay tuned for more knowledge about website coding that will be shared on the Boost Coding Flow channel.